All right.
The end of an era, if I remember correctly, right?
Pretty much.
Was that the promotional material for this?
Look at that paying background. Anyway.
So yeah, so far in the course of this trilogy, I can definitely say one thing.
What?
These are video games.
They're good games, but yeah, they definitely show their age. I will say this: I kind of wish we could see a more modern.
Hold on, listen to what she's saying.
Dead, and likely more to follow. An empire reduced to rubble. A prince cast to the streets and hunted like a common.
Are you creeping just so that we don't end up getting to the finishing point before a monologue's over?
All the outcomes lay bare to me.
Spoilers.
This one held the most promise of them all. The prince would have an opportunity to set things right.
Did they mean to spoil that?
See the thing of which I speak.
Okay then.
Let's play it first.
Also, it's like in Infinity War. How many outcomes did you see? A billion and something. How many would defeat the Vizier? One.
There's don't you see too? There's actually one of the many outcomes that Doctor Strange saw.
Oh, there he is.
Now where did I put those?
Those what?
I'm sorry, that
Oh my
design
God,
is just...
she's literally pulling an Aladdin on him.
And she spit him in the eye like in Titanic.
Actually, it reminded me more of Esmeralda in Hunchback of Notre Dame, the Disney movie.
Well, I'm mainly referring to Aladdin to the part where Jasmine leads Jafar on.
I know that. It's just that I know. It's just that this character in particular reminds me more of Esmeralda rather than Jasmine.
And fight. These can be a bit bitchy because the Vizier's attack are very fast and hard to telegraph, to see how they telegraphed. So you need to be quick and dodge laterally, either left or right. So you have to use the Prince's agility to your advantage here, especially because the dagger is still a relatively weaker weapon. Anyway, you were saying, Pedro?
You see, too, one of the many outcomes that Doctor Strange saw in Infinity War was actually a universe where EA is
acquired the license.
no, where EA is an incredibly beneficial and overall kind company. However, that also meant that the rest of the world was completely fucked as a result. So we needed to make that EA sacrifice for the sake of the greater good.
I can imagine it. I can imagine it now. Level 5 would last. Level 5 are like a company so incompetent they make crappy game after crappy game.
Oh, so you mean like
so it's
EA,
so it's opposite world.
Yeah.
Bizarre world.
It really says something that the AAA purchases here more often than not are the shoddy, weak games, whereas the non-AAA developed games are the ones that actually
that's common, Jova.
It's not necessarily a hard, fast rule. I mean, there are plenty of.
And there's also plenty of AAA company. Unlike what a lot of people on the internet would have you believe, not every AAA publisher is this abomination of Satan.
I mean, heck, even worse of them can occasionally turn out the good game.
Now the things get a bit different because you need to use the columns in order to reach the Vizier and use QTs in order to chop some of his wings. Like that.
Why doesn't the Vizier just actually attack us from way too high to the point where we can't get jumped
We're getting to that, Jova.
He's going with us, isn't he?
To answer...
Kinda.
Sorry, go ahead.
What's that you got on your back there?
To answer your question...
Continue, Pedro.
To answer you, Jova, well, that's just how it is, Jova. I mean, when it comes to being a AAA publisher, in order to achieve that status of being a AAA publisher that has a shit ton of reserves of money, you don't really achieve that by being 100% honest and devoid of anything that is money grubbery.
I'm not asking for 100% honesty. It's just I want to go back to the days when AAA development actually meant we were going to get something that actually felt like a AAA title.
Sure.
Because nowadays AAA
also another glitch. I'm just doomed to find them in these games, I guess.
To go with
Why not?
sorry.
Can we throw his broken off body parts at him?
To go.
Sorry, no. Anyway, there you go. Final stretch. You need to use your acrobatic skill in order to reach him, since he's high up there. In the meantime, he will attack you with energy balls. So there you
Yes,
go.
Pager?
You know, Mr. Vizier, maybe
on,
you
we're in the middle
shouldn't
of
have
something.
allowed these pieces to float into the air, allowing us to get at you.
Well, to go with Dwibs' example, I mean, the primary reason why something like level 5 doesn't have that AAA thing, despite being as old as they are right now, 20 plus years, is because in order to achieve that level of AAA, they would have to start selling out in some stuff, which, you know, apparently refuses to do. So.
Okay, here's the thing. To be a AAA company, you don't have to sell out. What you do, here's how EA got to be a AAA company. They just made good games, like legit good games. Let me put it like this. If EA used the practices that they do nowadays because they're a AAA company, they would not have become a AAA company. Like, that's the thing. It's you can get some places by doing this or that, but in the video game, world, it's
sure,
blatantly, hold on, let me finish.
Sorry.
In the video game world, it's becoming blatantly apparent that well,
Hold on, Joel, give me a second, because the game's slow-mo Matrix reference! Now, here's the thing, you actually need to wait until the game tells you with the glowing on the dagger, so you need to actually pay attention to the scene, because otherwise, you're dead.
When did this game come out again?
2005, I think.
Oh, okay, this was back when people
Everyone was ripping off the Matrix, yeah.
And suddenly transitioned to CGR.
Well, this is normal of games at the time. The God of War games also did this, where they transition between in-game cutscenes and CGI cutscenes.
So there you go.
What does
Yes,
he mean
sir?
the dagger promised him something?
Remember, he said that he had the dagger of time, but it was inactive until the prince returned to the normal timeline with Melina. So sorry, Milon Melina, Kailina. And
Really
at
well,
the
the
moment,
timey-wimey,
the dagger whispered to him. And there you go, Kailina is now alive again.
This world was not meant for me.
Oh, nice.
And she decides that since the power of the sand is too dangerous in the hands of mortal, she's gonna migrate to other worlds. She's gonna go full Dr. Manhattan on this. Which means rescuing her from the island was kind of again of a waste of our time.
Good for you, Prince. Your journey is at an end.
Well, at least the prince grew as a person, and now he can properly rule Persia. Shame his father had to die, though.
Seems everything will be fine and dandy, right? However, do you remember what happened in that snippets at the end of or within? Yeah, we had a teaser. Yeah. Jesus. So, okay. Hold on.
Wait, why is he
What
clothed
did you
now?
expect? That when you slew the vizier,
Inside
I would
his head.
simply disappear? Oh, but you are so blind. Your rage, your pride, your selfish ways, they gave me form and substance. Even with the sands gone, I have the strength to remain. And with the vizier gone, I can take your place and rule the kingdom. And there is absolutely
So yeah,
nothing
you
can
think
do.
he's the real final boss? No. Like, you do get to hit him a bit, but since it's mostly a story about redemption, you just need to basically get away from him. I want to use this time instead to say that in the mobile game, and I don't mean like iPhone or Android, I mean a legit Java, a prototype mobile game, you actually get to fight him and impale him on spikes, like in the original series. Just saying.
Huh. Why does the mobile game sound a bit more awesome?
It's awesome. I mean, I seriously.
Specifically for that.
Hold on. I understand what they're going for here. It's about the prince accepting that he needs to let go of his edginess. The whole warrior within edginess, he needs to free himself from that. And
It's
there's a sign
stupid,
that
so let it go.
he cannot allow himself to kill his own opponent because he will learn nothing from it.
He kind of already learned that when, he realized that his father was dead, and that's when he pretty much shrugged
Call
him
back to the
off.
first game.
Ah, that's nice.
The problem is with these berries. The problem is that the way it's presented, it's after the fight with the Vizier is
This reminds me-
anticlimactic.
This reminds me of one of
I think it's part
the
of the
levels
issue is
from.
like, well,
Yes,
So
Pedro.
it
Oh,
should be
Ah.
mine.
Reminds
notice
me,
my
Christy
directing.
took over.
Vertigo!
reminds me of a certain level from Sonic and the Secret Rings.
Yeah, I can see that.
Don't I?
I mean, the issue here is like, well, I think it's like, oh, I can just survive even without the sands of time because screw you!
Then again-
I mean,
But remember, he's still a fragment of him.
Then again,
I
knowing the
get
Sonic
that,
series,
but the fact that
Also, the ship at the beginning of World Within. Also, Jova, it's similar to the last stand that Sephiroth has in Final Fantasy VII. Even at his power weakened the most, he still tries a last attempt.
well, that made more sense, you know, in that regard. But I mean, I guess here it just comes a little out of nowhere to the point where, oh,
Like
so
I
they
said,
kind of
it's
know that he
anticlimactic.
technically.
I think the devs wanted to do something big for like an esoteric for the ending. Also, callback to World Within. But did not have the technology yet. There's a reason why Santa Monica wanted to wait until the PlayStation 3 to do God of War 3, because they knew they had to make the ending of the story of Kratos big with something, so we kind of needed to wait until the next console generational gap. Instead, for this, they waited. They didn't wait in order to give a more conclusive trilogy on the PS2, GameCube, and Xbox.
I think part of the issue is that, you know, they didn't even have to say he's tied to the sands of time, but they literally make it hard on themselves by admitting, oh, he's tied to the sands of time, but he can exist without the sands of time. It's like, why not
Also,
just
yeah,
have him
you
not be
cannot
tied?
die here, just saying. So this is almost completely scripted.
Yeah, I mean, what was the point of even tying his dark side to the sands of time if he's gonna ignore them? Like, you would have been better off just by just saying he's not connected to them.
Ooh.
It's neat and all, but yeah, I
Die,
kinda prefer a final
die.
fight.
Die, stupid
You're
cringy,
horrible.
stupid cringy me.
Have you rage? After all, I'm still right
Die,
here,
me.
standing
Oh, shit.
before you.
Also, you know, it's kind of weird because this suggests that, you know, so he was actually blatantly evil. Like, I get the point of the flanderization in some regards, but you think maybe it was better when they were just sticking
Don't
with
you
the
see-
idea that he was just a more aggressive version of him as opposed to,
Don't you see,
oh, he's
Jova?
actually evil.
Don't you, don't you see, Jova, the
The
plot
end of the
twist?
first game.
Don't you see, Jova, the plot twist is that the prince from the second game was actually his Heartless. It wasn't... it was...
Kinda. So there you go. His love for Farah basically tells him to just get away.
Sadness and cruel intentions.
Isn't that what we've been trying to do the whole time this section anyway?
Turn away.
just a reminder.
I will lead you.
So you can still be here and fight the Dark Prince, but we can just, forget him. Also, there you go.
Bye.
Here's the two thrones, even though they have absolutely no meaning. Again, I think it was one of the things that was cut away from the original script.
Yeah,
Bye.
Yeah,
screw-
whatever.
screw you.
Multiple
Bye.
copies of you.
What are you doing?
What reason do I even have to fight you?
I could just leave. Bye.
I mean, there's really no sense of
I'm
struggle
sorry.
here. Like, the prince had already told that he was done
Yeah.
with fighting.
It's that whole thing. Sonic, I'm sorry, Sonic, I have no choice. Of course you have a choice. You could, not do it.
Without spoiling, Batman Arkham Knight has a final confrontation similar to this, and it's much better.
Well, yeah.
Are you all right?
Anyway,
Oh my god, this is like the ending
for
of Final
how
Fantasy
this
VII.
final sequence was stupid, I kind of still like how the game actually ends.
The cutscenes in these games are pretty much structured exactly like the PS2 God of War games.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't surprise me. A lot
Hold
of
on.
companies were doing.
Something I don't understand.
But yeah, Farah has a lot to catch up on, so what does the prince do?
He's gonna tell her the story.
From the very beginning with the exact same lines.
Okay, that's actually
Which
nice.
it has the feeling of the classic Arabian Night Tale, and recall back from the beginning of the first game. Basically, what cements the conclusion of the trilogy.
Oh god, we're looping the game series now.
We're going to start. We're going to start over.
Oh god. It's like
Alright,
when I looped back cutscene
Sorry.
from Uncharted 4.
There is a post-game scene, but it's nothing too important. So we can still watch it, but it's not like an extra scene that adds to the plot. So don't worry about that. So before the final thoughts, so continue what you were saying, Jova.
Yeah, it's like that final scene just came out of nowhere because it just feels like something extra tacked on for something the prince already decided on anyway.
No, Jova,
so...
you were saying something about EA during the fight with the Vizier.
Oh, yeah, EA. Well, like I said, the thing is like, well, it's really becoming common knowledge that AAA companies that think they can get away with this stuff are finally seeing bleach for it. So, yeah, it may make you a AAA in a short term, but not for a long term. It's like, that's the problem with EA. It's like, why I don't get why they're so surprised their stocks are dropping when they're making these repeatedly shoddy products and also insulting their
the
players.
thing, Java, is that if I had to be honest, I honestly think EA arrived at the AAA status just by having enough profit and fame thanks to the sport games and some of the licensing stuff in the early 2000s, mainly Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings.
But here's the thing, those were actually good for when they came out.
Well, they were tied to some of the studios that EA bought forcefully, like the Command and Conquer team, for example.
Yeah.
But anyway,
To
final
answer...
thoughts.
okay, sorry.
No, go ahead, Pedro. Might as well close it up.
And just to finish, what I meant by selling out earlier, Jovo, I don't mean like I don't think what I mean is like something like this. Okay, again, to continue with our comparison, let's say EA. EA takes the FIFA franchise, well, not just FIFA, like it takes their sports franchises and their other franchises and milks them like beyond recognition, all that good stuff, and just is pretty complacent with it as long as they make money. Whereas he is always saying that he wants his company to constantly be coming up with new IPs and new ideas and not just rely on the same ones over and over. And that, of course, leads to not as much revenue as just giving the people what they want, which is this, like for example, just milking the Latent franchise over and over or something like that. You know what I mean? Like it's just in order to make a lot of money, you have to
serialize.
You have to serialize, and you have to make some sacrifices in terms of integrity and stuff like that. It's just you just can't be all heart and no selling out if you want to become a super rich company. It just doesn't work. And I know you're going to argue that it's all about making good games, like you said. Well, that might have worked back in the 90s when games were a lot more simple to make and cheaper to produce. And remember, EA started back in the 90s, so obviously they had that history of long-running good games from back those days. Level 5 started back in the early 2000s, back when games were starting to get more expensive to produce. So obviously, by the time they became independent, it was by the time the mid-2000s. So it's a very complicated issue, I would argue.
I mean, granted, you don't always have to sell out per se. I mean, look, I'm not saying that it's always just a matter of strictly passion and whatnot, but you gotta know what the audience was and what you want. A good company that can become AAA by legitimate means knows what the people want without, insulting them. That's what helps you become a AAA company. Yeah, I mean, there's some selling out maybe here and there, but never to the lengths that EA and Activision do, and Ubisoft until recent years.
Anyway, final thoughts, Dweebs, since you're the shortest one, I guess.
Yeah, I'll be honest. This entire trilogy as a whole hasn't been all that interesting. The gameplay is dated really severely over the years, and the story is nothing special. The music is unmemorable, even with the wacky, weird radical shift in the second game soundtrack. It's just there's nothing really there. The graphics, again, I know this is the HD version, but I've seen better looking PS2 games.
I swear, the PS2 version actually looks better than the HD version.
It does. There are comparison videos.
And seriously, Sonic Heroes had subtitles during the cutscenes when they were talking during the level, and that came out in 2004.
Sonic Adventure 1 had subtitles, and that was back in 1998.
Or 1999 everywhere else. So this series is both behind the times and pretentious.
Will you still say that at least it tried to be a bit better after War Within with this?
No, really. What it did was just like, The second game sucked. Let's just do the first one again.
Sure. All right then.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't see the appeal of this at all.
No, don't worry, Dweebs. Yes, just a second, Jova, since we're about to get
The post-credit scene.
yeah, which is
Oh,
not
Pink, I remember those guys.
your general.
Still around.
I think we're more like the engine provider. Anyway, for some reason they decided to put bloopers.
Oh,
Makes sense. A lot of PS2 games liked to do that.
Also, these were the years where Pixar was rampant, which means when they had the fake bloopers in the credits.
Ow.
Oh,
well, that was mostly just Toy Story 1 and 2 that did that.
oh, Bug's Life also did it.
And
Yeah,
now
you're
it's-
right.
Prince of Persia, the two balls.
Basically, Pixar kind of kicked off the tradition
Oh.
of letting animated features have bloopers in them.
Oh, there.
Big fan of. Well, technically, Liar Liar also did that even
Thanks
before
to all of our
Pixar.
fans.
Well,
Well, in 5 languages.
Wait,
That's a
Pedro.
blank
Liar
lie.
Liar's not animated.
That's why I said but it was still one that did the same thing, even though.
Oh, plenty of movies were doing bloopers before. And what I'm saying is, like, well, Pixar introduced the notion of animated features having bloopers.
Also, I
because
wonder
guess
what's
it's
the
common.
biggest. Also, I wonder what's the biggest lie. This one, "See you soon," or that character in Rayman 3 saying "See you in Rayman 4." So, anyway, go ahead, Joe.
Okay, I think the best way to describe this trilogy, it's aged like rotten cheese. It was great. Okay, these games, except for the second one, were probably great by the time they came out. On the PS2, they look better, sound better as well. The subtitles, yeah, those are stupid. It's just, yeah, it feels like the stuff is aged. Like, but not in the sense of, Crash Bandicoot, where that aged with style and grace, the one where you can still play the originals. No, this one feels like it's aged in the sense where the gameplay still works, but everything else doesn't as much, because let's be quite honest, unlike the likes of Crash Bandicoot, this one has more of an emphasis on story than, games of the PlayStation era. And it's kind of weak. Like, okay, it's one of those ones that tries to use atmosphere, so there's barely any music at times. Yeah, that kind of makes it a bit boring. And yeah, the stories, while intricate and technically important, also kind of barely factor in because, yeah, a lot of it's just platforming. And the physics can be a bit wonky. It really feels weird that they didn't, tighten things up for this HD trilogy. But then again, what a shock. A lot of HD trilogies ported to PS3 and Xbox 360s were kind of crappy for some reason. That said, though, this game itself, I won't say this is a bad game per se. It's just a good game that aged very, very badly. Like, I definitely do like the style and the uniqueness of it. Also taking pop shots at the previous game in an actual fitting way for the story. That's nice. This game, in and of itself, I'd say it's a relic to be kept. It wouldn't be a relic to keep if we actually still got Prince of Persia games, but, well, rest in peace. I hate that reboot. Basically, like I said,
Have you played the reboot?
I don't want to talk about it.
We'll get to.
Basically, good games, but they've aged very badly. I'd only recommend these if you're like a huge Prince of Persia fan.
And even then, just stick with probably an emulator, a GameCube emulator, and play those, which probably were the optimal versions anyway.
Yeah. All right, who's next?
Pedro.
Okay, much like the other said, yeah, these games clearly have aged. I'm a bit more lenient on them, actually. Speaking as an Uncharted fan, I can tell that Amy Hennig probably played these games, and because, like I said, the actual gameplay feels a lot like a beta of Uncharted in a lot of ways, especially in the climbing mechanics. So personally, I think it's fine for its timing, considering how we had games later on. Not just I can speak for the reboot, because apparently after this is all downhill from what you guys are saying. So I guess.
Well, there was
like I
interplay.
said, well, I'll get to it at the end. But before now, keep going.
It's still. I can still say that the gameplay, at the very least, looks like a fine enough adventure game for what it is in terms of being an overall linear story-driven adventure game. But yeah, but the gameplay is not exactly super refined as it would be in later games that do this kind of thing. Which would be fun if it made up for it in other areas, but like Jeff was saying, it doesn't much because
the story starts off interesting in each of these games. The problem is that while they have such great starts, the middle points tend to be so sparsely filled with story bits to the point where the story is scattered around here and there, and then you get the final thing at the end. Like, you know, I mean, if it's one of those you want to make your own story things, that's fine, except it's not that. You still have got the actual set story there, and they're linear, like you mentioned. It's just they have good ends and beginnings, but it's the meat in between that's lacking.
Yeah. It's okay for me. It's like yeah, it's okay. See, here's the thing. Like Joe was saying, yes, there are times when there's very little music because they want to go for the atmosphere thing, which would be fine by me because the Uncharted games also do that a lot, where there's sections where we're climbing and doing various gameplay stuff, and there's no music technically. But I think those games work better with it because the stories are much better written and you're overall more invested. In here, the story and the overall writing is very mediocre, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
There's not that much, like the characters are very shallow. They're like there's not, for example, the women in these games are basically just trophies for the prince to save.
Not so much fair. I'd only say that was really Melina in the second game. Kylina.
I guess, yeah, but
the unexpected crossover with Mortal Kombat.
But even her is not exactly. She's not.
Farah starts off nicely, but towards the end of this game becomes the damsel in distress, and she doesn't really get a chance to do much. I mean, yes, she rejects Zurvan. Yes, that, by the way, that's the name of the vizier, Zurvan. And spits him in the eye, like kind of like that character in Titanic. But aside from that, she's still a damsel in distress to rescue.
Yeah, it's again the lack of music for atmosphere thing would have worked fine if the game did a better job of story pacing and make the story and characters more engaging. But because it's not. It's much less tolerable to this is one of those cases where they wanted to go story driven but they didn't really have the writing to back that up, so that's the primary reason why this doesn't work as well as in games that will come out later that do this kind of gameplay. It's kind of like that's about it. But aside from that, yeah, the music is the little music there is fine. I don't really remember much of it, but I guess it works for the purpose of the game. The graphics, they look fine for PS2 standards, I guess. I'm not familiar with the PS2, but apparently these remasters botched up the visuals. For PS2 standards, these graphics look fine to me. But yeah, they're not. But they can have their occasional derpy moments. Yeah. Aside from that, yeah, it's a game that has mechanically sound. It has fine enough gameplay, even if the gameplay is a bit dated, and there are plenty of modern games that have done this kind of thing better. So yeah, it leaves very little reason to play these games nowadays, unless, of course, like Jova said, if you're a Prince of Persia fan, like even if you're a fan of this particular genre of game, like might as well stick with other games of this genre that are better.
How about the series that killed it and now where's its corpse? Assassin's Creed. Oh wait.
Well, yeah, I guess you could play Assassin's Creed. But yeah, like I said, these games are mechanically sound. They probably were very much. These are games that really sold pretty badly for all intents, in the sense that they were probably much better games back in the day. Because I do remember these games getting fairly good reviews back when they first came out.
And I think they sold pretty good back in the day. I mean, they must have for Ubisoft to have made a trilogy.
So yeah, it worked fine for the time, but yeah, these games did not really age gracefully at all.
No, to be fair, them aging isn't what killed them. No, what killed them was Ubisoft themselves with Assassin's Creed. I'm not letting that go.
I'm about to state it to Jova, don't worry.
So yeah, again, these games are mechanically sound, but that's really it. Everything else just doesn't really hold up to modern standards. It really falls falls flat because the graphics are standard and the gameplay is standard, and that's basically it. The story is just forgettable, and it's really hard to care. So, and in the game, and like Jova said, these games are clearly trying to be more story-driven than the previous Prince of Persia games. So, if you're going to do that, you have to at the very least have the writing to back it up, which you don't really. The characters, I don't remember a single character that I found interesting in this trilogy. So, honestly, but again, if the reboot is definitely as much, then well, I guess what can you say? All right,
The fourth game was kinda good.
The fourth game tried to put a bit more emphasis onto that, but
I'll just cap things off by saying that these games are begging for a remake in the style of something like, Resident Evil 2 remake. Something to flesh it out, make them look better, control better, and all that jazz.
Well, we know what to do to it. Sell the IP at Capcom.
Why not? Anyway, go ahead, too.
Okay. First of all, for the game itself, since there were all these behind the scenes mumbo jumbo about the game having to be rewritten multiple times, and Ubisoft trying to desperately backpedaling on the edge. I can see why the end product feels confusing in some aspects, and why some of the writings feel botched. Some things are missing, some things are different depending on the version. And as a conclusion of the trilogy, it's fine, but the problem still remains that the series basically had a good start up running with Sands of Time, completely tripped over itself with Warrior Within, and tried to put itself back on its feet, but jumped up on its place with this one and arrived at the finish line. The fact that the series and the trilogy ended with this one was fine to me, but it would still more to the franchise with other maybe side stories, a distant sequel, having like the Son of the Prince doing stuff, for example, the Son of Prince and Farah. There were some minor stuff, but it was pointless fluff, like a tactical game for the DS, if I recall correctly. But aside from that, for the franchise as a whole, I mean, this particular sub-series, aside from the writing style, honestly, I think it has aged on a couple of aspects. Mainly to me, it's some of the gameplay. Like I said, the falling damage, similar to the Grand male components of Grand Family in King's Quest, can be aggravating a lot, especially in the first game. The excessive edginess of Warrior Within makes even the better combat so frustrating. And this one has some of these unexpected gameplay changes, like the what's it called? The
swaps.
No. Actually, I liked how the Dark Prince controls in this game. I'm talking about the riding sections on the chariots.
Yeah.
The chariots, there you go. Those are terrible too because they have bad driving controls, and they were highly advertised, by the way. And you only get to do two twice, and one of them is short as fuck.
We actually found them pretty fun.
They are to look, Java, but to actually control them, it's a different beast altogether. The driving controls are stiff. Think of it kind of like the crash-free bike sections, only when the model does not incline itself when you drive, when you derate. Aside from that, I have a soft spot for this. I did not grow up with this. I only played a bit of the first game when I was at a friend's house. I did not care that much. But then when we were on sale, I got these on the PS3, PlayStation Network during the sale. But I kind of had a soft spot, not certainly for Warrior Within, mind you, but as an effort on its own. Remember, this was one of the franchises that Ubisoft had back in the day that kickstarted their big rise up in the AAA industry. We were talking about that earlier. This was one of the things that actually kickstarted it. And I can see why Ubisoft had the intention basically then to drop, because Assassin's Creed started as a Prince of Persia spin-off called Prince of Persia Assassin, but then it became its own thing and basically usurped its ancestors' legacy. And now, and the rest of the story is there. Like even one of the recent Assassin's Creed games was supposed to be a Prince of Persia game. I mentioned. However, the adventures of the prince do not end properly here. There is, of course, the reboot in 2008. We'll bring Shirei to that. She's going to enjoy that, I'm sure of it. But as for the Sand saga, after the terrible success, more terrible than success of the reboot, Ubisoft in 2010 tried to do some damage control by having a game.
Not for nothing, I don't think success is the right word.
Well, the success of suckiness. There you go. Try to do some damage control by having a sort of a tie-in game released around the same time of the movie. Not a game. Yeah, we'll get to that too. The game itself was not well based on the movie. It was its own thing. 1.5 a story that's basically a 1.5 chapter between Sands of Time and War Within, telling about the prince. At least the canonical version. Like I said, there are 4 different versions of the game, and I don't know why. So on that front, we'll see eventually for Forgotten Sands HD. But as for the franchise itself, we'll see you next for the actual 2008 reboot. So see ya, I guess.
See ya.
Ta-ta.